Diana, welcome.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's just jump right in and get started. I'm curious about your ADHD diagnosis. How long ago were you diagnosed? I know it wasn't that long ago, but what was kind of happening in your life that led you to start to connect the dots and think this could be ADHD?
Yes, it's interesting that I think your podcast was the first time when actually I started to take it seriously, but when I was thinking, because this is a question that you always ask your women, your guests, and I started to think when actually it was the first time when I started to think and when I heard about ADHD, and actually it was in kindergarten. And it's interesting that I heard about this notion ADHD, and I asked my mother, "Was this?" And she said, "No, it's just children are agitated." And I said, "I'm agitated." And she said, "No, but it's not you. So you're just naughty." It's kind of this kind of thing. Like other kids might be like ADHD, but you, if you're agitated like this, it's because this is how you are. It's not a problem. It's just how you are. A bit like naughty. You need to control yourself, kind of. You're a girl. You should be otherwise. So that was the first time when I heard about ADHD, and after I kind of forgot. But if I think back, always I kind of had these problems of finding difficult to control myself or to be like other girls. But when I started to think about diagnosis, was actually my last year of university. When I was having university, a job, I was starting to learn a little bit to start my online business. So many things are going on in my life, and I was so close to burnout. And just one day listening to your podcast, I think I forgot. I think the name of your guest, and I feel so sorry about that. But she said something like ADHD is something that you didn't know you have, and once you know that you have it, everything starts to make sense. And
Yeah.
I remember you talking about how you went back in your journals and you realized so many things about yourself, and that it was a very emotional thing for you. And I remember I was doing groceries and podcasts because I cannot do anything without my headphones, right? So I was walking on the street and I hear this, and I was, oh my God, that's my life. And I got very emotional on the street, and then I started to listen more and more and more, and it was really like, oh, okay, now I understand. But actually, and there's one more important thing. In my last year of university, I worked as a shadow teacher, which means that I go to school with a little girl that has autism. So I'm curious about your perspective here, but in her behavior, I started to find myself so much. For example, her sensitivity for the noise. And she was doing this little thing, taking my hands and putting on her ears like this, like it was too much for her.
Mhm.
And I was feeling her. I was like, oh my God, I want to do this too. Like, and sometimes like really like so much noise, she wanted like to just cry and or scream. And I feel you. Like really, I didn't judge 1 second because I said, okay, that's what I want to do as well. So many things started to connect. And about diagnosis, I remember I asked her therapist, do you know anyone who can diagnose ADHD? And she said, why? And I said, I think I might have it. And she said, are you sure? Are you hyperactive? And I said, I don't know, but I think I have it, even if I don't feel like I'm hyperactive, whatever that means.
Mhm.
But yes, this kind of was my path till the moment when I realized, okay, I have it. Officially, I never been diagnosed, but for sure, I'm 100% is there. Like all I do, all I think, all how my life is arranged and how my life is going is there, and I can feel it. And since I know and since I acknowledge my life is better.
Yeah, I mean, self-diagnosis, I think, is 100% valid. And also, really, when our life starts to change, right? Like all the things you were talking
Hmm.
about, when you start to look over the course of your whole life and think, oh my goodness, I had no idea that all of these seemingly random struggles that I encountered all come back to ADHD. And you're like, yes, it all makes sense now. I think that's where the journey begins, long before any medical professional gives you the thumbs up. We already know by the time I think many of us, when we get a professional diagnosis, it's like, how do I convince this provider to see what I see, right? And as opposed to, I feel like that's the majority of the experience. So was this in Romania, the teacher that you were talking to about getting the? Okay.
Yes, this happened in Romania, and to be honest, I see this, and I was surprised that also this is happening in the US, because Romania being more like a smaller country where the mental health awareness is just starting, just in the last, let's say, like 3-4 years, it started to develop. I was surprised that you also highlight this problem in the US, and to be honest, I was ready to be denied. I was ready to be denied in where all the places where I'm gonna go, and if I mention the ADHD condition, I'm sure, and I'm already okay. You can deny it because it's not obvious. It's something invisible. So.
I know, right? Well, it is. I mean, I think that's what's so fascinating is how different so many of our experiences have been. It all depends on how much independent research a medical provider has done. It's not formal. It's not built into their training. And if it is, it's built into, like, I think child psychiatrists have formal training in ADHD, but it's ADHD in children. So it's really like you have no idea if the person you're seeing has any idea of, has any background in ADHD, or if they read the 2-page chapter in Psych 101 on ADHD, which is, terribly misleading. But I'm just curious, like, what even do you think the diagnosis would even entail in Romania? Do you think that do you know anybody who has successfully been diagnosed, or is it just something that's like only with children at this point?
I think currently, I don't want to give misinformation, but I think currently it's more aware for the children. It's like a child disease. I think this is how it's been seen, and after you're grown up, it passed. Like, I think it's more of just for children. For adults, not so much. And I think, especially for women, I think we're learned to hide it so much. Then no one can even, like, it's very difficult to be diagnosed or to be recognized. And also because discipline is so important, and you say, okay, discipline is something I need to learn. Again, you have to keep it inside. And yes, I don't think the awareness for ADHD is too high in Romania right now. I think, again, it's something for children. As adults, it's not there.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think it's this idea that it's a self-control issue, right? So if you are still struggling in adulthood, then you just obviously have no self-control. And so that's on you. That's something you have to, like, suffer in silence with. And I think, one of the themes we explore so much in this podcast is, like, why so many of us end up with diagnoses of depression and anxiety is because of that connection between feeling like, what's wrong with me that I don't have that self-control that I was supposed to, like, children can get away with it. Although, I'm curious, like, have you had conversations with your mom as an adult now? Sort of, what are her thoughts about some of the issues that you struggle with now, even in adulthood? Does she still feel like it's just your personality?
I think it's, again, for different
You're like, I don't want to go there.
No, it's kind of different generation, and for them growing up during communism, again, a different context completely. So it's a kind of luxury to be able to say about myself, yes, I have ADHD, and this might be a reason why I find it so difficult to do all these things that makes me messy and naughty and disorganized and not like other people. And including this multi-interest that I had, always I want to do this and this and this. And after I was telling you about my last year of university where I hit that bottom line where I was just, I cannot anymore. I cannot like everyone anymore because I'm not. And I don't know if me recognizing, okay, I have ADHD and I have a need for multiple interests. This is a need for me. I need to do more things. And I think to have this ability of focusing on one thing and doing it well, it's so appreciated in our society. So me being, I cannot do just one thing because I'm bored. It's just you're not fine, you're not okay. And always I was, but this, what about this and this? And after I said, okay, I cannot anymore. I cannot do masters right now because normally the path is you do university, then you do your master degree, and after you'll see what you're gonna do. For me, I said no master now. I want to go as a volunteer in Turkey. Like, yay, completely different thing. And I remember everyone was just, are you sure? Like, and okay, and first time it was only 2 months, and everyone was just like, okay, 2 months, and after she's gonna come back and she's gonna go to university and she's gonna be normal like all the other children. I said, I cannot. Still, I cannot. I'm not there. And I'm sorry, I forgot. What was the question?
I don't remember either. I think it was. I think I was asking about whether or not your mom has come around to the idea that this is ADHD, as opposed to just, like when you were a kid, she was like, that was just you were naughty. If she sees some of the more like nuanced side of ADHD now.
I think I had first me to be fine with this, that it's possible her and my family never to understand. Like, this is one thing that I had to embrace. Like, it's possible never ever they to understand. And it's possible some people in my life never to understand and still think about me that maybe you're like this, you're like that. But the more I understand, the most important thing is me. Like, do I embrace myself fully? Like, do I embrace myself that my room can be a mess from time to time and I am still a good person? And I can be interested in so many other things, and one day I can connect them together and do something. Yes, and again, like the idea that I might not have or obtain ever an approval from some people, I think it's something that really gives me strength to keep on going. Like, I need to give myself approval and permission to do different things in my life.
That is so beautifully said. And I'm so envious that that is a realization you've come to in your early 20s. You're 22 still, or are you?
Yes, I'm 22.
I mean, I'm envious because I feel like it took me until my mid 40s with that diagnosis to have that revelation, right? To realize that I can be chaotic and do all of these things and still be an incredible person who gets things done. And to really lean into that. Like, I think that's so wonderful and encouraging to hear that you're able to have that that attitude at such a young age. So, so how did you end up in Turkey? So walk me through that, because I think that's fascinating.
Yes, I really want to mention this, and I want to talk about this in a way that I think, because you mentioned the fact that in your early 20s you couldn't understand or you couldn't really acknowledge, but I think also because there weren't too many options back then. Now there's internet and you can see different options that you can do. So for now, for a young person that graduate high school or graduate university, there are so many other options to reach or to develop yourself and to grow without necessarily leading or going on the same path as everyone is going. But people don't know, and sometimes I feel like we're even afraid to look on what other options are there, because there's one notion of success still, even though there can be so many other paths that lead to success. One thing I'm trying to do, and also with my social media, is to promote, this is how I live my life. Just this. I don't say you have to do it like this, but I say, I'm doing this. It's a bit unusual, I know. Sometimes it's very difficult, yes, but it's beautiful and it's different, and it brings still development and growth. And even though I'm not doing it in the formal way, and I love this notion of educated differently. And I had a series of live on my Instagram account, and now I'm thinking, and putting in the freezer, kind of the freezer of ideas. Like I'm thinking maybe a podcast one day, Educated Differently, where I can talk about different ways of getting educated without going to university and there and there and there and there. I don't say it's a bad way. I think it's beautiful, and I encourage formal education. I think without formal education, I couldn't be here, because formal education gave me so many gifts, but there are so many other ways to do it. And yes, how did I reach in Turkey? First, I was thinking while I was again in my last month, kind of I was working for my license paper, for my license diploma, and thinking, what can I do next? What can I do next? And I remember I heard this story. I will say the story and then I'll say how I reached in Turkey. It was a small booklet of therapeutic stories. I forgot the author, but I'll shortly say it because I don't remember 100% how it goes. It was a story about this girl that wanted to go from New York to Los Angeles, let's say. I forgot the destinations, but let's just say this. And she said, okay, I can take a taxi, I can go to the airport, I can take the plane and reach there, and I'll be there in, I don't know, maybe 1 hour, maybe a few hours. Anyway, it's a short time. It will be a bit more expensive, but I'll reach fast. I'll see the city, blah, blah, blah. The other option, maybe I can take the bus, and it's going to take maybe more hours, more time, more days. It's going to be a bit cheaper, but I'm going to see different cities. I'm going to explore a little bit. I'll have time to think. Maybe I'll get tired, but I'll see different places, and it will be more economical. Another option, maybe I can take a few months off, and I can take still the bus or just a car, rent a car, and go to different places, and I can see some natural parks, or I can see some other cities. I can go and visit different places, and so on. And the main idea was that there's not only one way and perfect way. You can do it in so many other ways. Yes, you can think that will be some advantage and disadvantages, but you can do it, and you can choose your own way, and you can still reach a destination. And it really made me think, like, I stayed with this story in my mind for so long, and I said, which options do I want to take now? And I remember telling this story to my therapist, and she said, Diana, sometimes you can take the bike, and sometimes you can walk, and sometimes you can take the boat, and sometimes you can change the transportation. You don't have, if you take the bike now, it doesn't mean that in a certain moment in your life you cannot take the car, and after you can change it with a bus, and after you can change it with a boat. It's kind of this mix of multi-realities in the same time and choices that you can make. And how did I reach in Turkey? Well, in Europe, there's this project called European Solidarity Corps. And unfortunately, it's not so famous as it can, because you can choose your project. There are different projects. There are education, environment, animals, different topics. And you're not paid, but they are giving you a home. They are giving you pocket money and food money. And most of the time you can choose your country, and you can just go like this. And they, of course, reimbursement for transportation. And I was in a place in my life a little bit lost, a little bit confused. And I find this project in a region from Turkey called Malatya. I never heard about it. I don't know what is it. But it attracted me because it's new, it's South Turkey, never heard about it. I will never go, just like to travel. And I went, and I discovered like it's interesting because it gives me a bit of comfort to think about my life. Because in this point, I'm still thinking what I want to do, what masters do I want to choose, what career I want to choose, and it gives me comfort. It gives me a home. It gives me something to do because we're teaching English. We connect with community. We connect with ourselves, but we still have free time to do sports or to connect with other people from the city, to make friends, to sleep, to work, to think. So it gives you this space of safety, but not safety to lose yourself, but safety to find yourself. Did I answer your question?
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, I think the European Solidarity Corps is an amazing program, yeah, and I had never heard of it. I looked it up after I found out that you were in it, and was thought it was such an incredible program, and it reminded me of how many friends of mine when we were graduating university who went on to teach English in Russia or Japan, or would go on and do these like 1 year stints, and then they would end up staying there, and I was like, that has ADHD written all over it, right? That like the wanderlust, and not only the wanderlust of just like picking up and moving to a different country, but also teaching, right? I think teaching is so many neurodivergent end up in a role where they're teaching. And so the fact that there's the teaching element, but also the social justice element and I feel like that's, you could probably diagnose everybody who's in that program with you. It just feels like it's very ADHD friendly. In terms of how, just the excitement and the change.
It actually is. And this is my third project where I am now. Actually, after I went to another one, and this is the third one where I am still in Turkey. I wanted to stay in Turkey because it's so different than other countries that I visit. One thing I wanted to mention always, for me, it was so tiring, these social rules that you have on the table to sit like this, and the plate has to be like this, and you have to eat in a certain way. And I was in a point in my life where I had a chance maybe to be in a high society group of people. And I remember this person telling me, like, be careful before you go to a dinner. If you're invited, you have to eat from before so you're not too hungry when you reach to this dinner. And I was, what? Like, and they said, yes, because it's not polite to eat so much when you're invited. And I was, what? And like, why would anyone invite you to dinner if you cannot eat? Like, for me, this doesn't make sense. And I remember them, they were like, and I didn't say anything. I was just, is something wrong with me? Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. And reaching to this country where they mention, come, please be hungry when you come. And they want you to eat. And it's kind of obvious, like, I love obvious experiences. Like, you say this to me, I know that you meant that thing. I cannot live a life where we're polite. I cannot like this because I don't understand. I don't understand. And people don't get it. I really don't understand it. And after even this shame and guilt grows, and I just cannot do it anymore. It's just enough time of my life I grew with shame and guilt. Now I want to be simple and obvious, and when I say something to mean it, when someone says something to me, I know that they mean it, and like this I can live, but not other way. And yes, I wanted to stay more in Turkey because it was interesting for me that everything's so clear and a little bit of chaos, and everything is so diverse. In a region of Turkey, something is in a way, and then you go in another place, and the way they talk, the way they walk, the way they move, everything's so different and diverse. And I say, okay, I want to stay here for a while because this is so much stimulus. Is it correct like this? So much novelty, yes. And at the same time, I have this safety, yes. So it gives me what I need. And in projects where I am now, it's so ADHD friendly because I'm working in a youth center and sports center. So we have so much sports activities and also youth activities, and we also work with children and also work with adults and also work with youngsters and also do some sports, and also like everything is so, when I first saw the schedule, I said, this is perfect. Not one single day is the same.
Right? Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think, going back to what you said about the meal, going to somebody's house, I think that was such a perfect allegory for how authenticity is so important to so many of us, and having I see that so much, not only in my own life, but in a lot of the women I interview, just this desire to cut through the crap and be authentic and be true and be real, and how that affects, and how oftentimes that can affect, can lend to why so many of us have difficulty with relationships and friendships, especially with other women, because there is this like unspoken code sometimes in relationships among women, that we don't know, like, where you're sort of like, either we don't understand what's going on, or we just feel like it's ridiculous and we don't want to play by those rules because we want to play by like something that feels more authentic. I saw a TikTok video recently where somebody was talking about a neurotypical asking you if you are hungry, and if you're not hungry in that moment, a neurodivergent would be like, no, I'm not hungry, but not realize that if somebody was asking you, are you hungry, what they're actually saying is, I'm hungry, do you want to go eat with me? And then the neurodivergent person didn't pick up on that. And so then they look like a jerk because they're like, no, I'm not hungry. And I don't know. It's hard to explain. But it was just reminded me of how so many of our communication difficulties do lie around this idea of authenticity and kind of how we interpret situations. And when there's something where there's like some weird social rule or something that makes no sense, you're just like, why would I do that? That makes no sense. I feel like we're very like logically driven in that way. And I also, going back to what you had talked about with the story of taking the bus or the bike or the walk too, it really reminded me of that idea of like that life is about the journey, not necessarily the destination. And I think that describes so many of us, right, in terms of all the things we want to do and all the different, like I often will look back and think about all the different random certifications I got and all of these things that at the time felt like they were leading to nowhere. And so I looked at them as though I was a failure because I was like, oh, I did this thing for a year, but I couldn't keep up with it. And then I did this other thing for a year and I couldn't keep up with it. And now I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful that I did all of these different things that have made me who I am today. I just thought you did a better job of describing it than I. But I think that's many of our experiences. A lot of us have that experience of just being like, I want to, what's most interesting right now, as opposed to thinking about where this is going to get me and what the destination is. And I'm like, is there really, I don't feel like one is better than the other. I think they're just different and they're both beautiful in their own way.
And I find it such a gift because kind of we're used to trying, and because we're used to trying, and okay, sometimes I'm a little bit like, I'm so excited about this, but I know it might be just like a little bit, because after it might get very down, and as all the other things I'm looking back. But now I'm thinking it's an ADHD thing. Maybe I should pay attention. Is it something that I cannot do it? Like I cannot, it's drowning me, or I can just put a little bit push. But it's kind of, again, I think a matter of exercise. And I love this. I had this teacher in university, and he was introduction in therapy, psychotherapy teacher, and he mentioned these beautiful 3 questions that he says, okay, when you have a patient, a client that you're working with, sometimes you need to ask yourself these questions, like, does this person doesn't know how to do it? Or maybe he cannot do it, or maybe he doesn't want to do it. And it's different, because sometimes we need to ask ourselves, I don't want to do it, I cannot do it, or I don't know how. And it's special because the answer leads to different solutions. If I cannot, it means, okay, I need to rest, why I cannot, different questions that I need to ask myself. If I don't know how, okay, maybe I need to learn some things. Maybe I need to develop some other skills. And if I don't want to, okay, then just don't do it. Like, you don't have to do it if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. I know, right? I feel like that's one of the questions I ask myself all the time now that I never did before my diagnosis, which was, okay, if I'm struggling with this, who can I get to do this for me? Mm-hmm. Which I'd never had that. I never used to do that. If I was struggling with something, I would like double down and be like, I got to figure this out. What's wrong with me that I can't do this? And now I'm like, I feel like it's much quicker for me to just be like, yeah, this is not going to happen. So I'm going to mm-hmm. not force it. And I'm going to see if there's somebody else who could do this for me.
Yes, and also this idea of asking for help is so new, because I don't know, we're living, or I grew up in like individualist culture where helping is not that common. And after I grew up, after I my country, after I left my country, and started to interact with people from other countries, I somehow still chose people that a bit individual centered. My career, my
Mhm.
job, my whatever. And now I'm here in Turkey where it's so common to help each other. And you mentioned the relationship part, and I find it so interesting that love bombing, it's a notion that is circulating now. And here in Turkey, some actions that are normal for them in other country or in other culture can be considered 100% love bombing. And at the beginning, I was so like, is this love bombing? Because this person comes to hospital with me because I'm sick, like, but we just met. So what should I do? How should I see this? Or this person come to me and bring me soup at my home? Is this love bombing? Because I didn't ask for it. And it's interesting how relationship plays such an important role in our life and the way we see it. And depending on the culture also, the cultural role plays such an important role. And I see it as such a gift to be able to be in a culture where helping is just normal because I need it, but I had no idea I need it till now. And now I see how my life gets better and calmer because I can say, yes, you can help me this time. It's beautiful.
That is really beautiful. And I think it also comes back to the idea of authenticity too, right? Which is like feeling very uncomfortable when somebody is being so helpful and going out of their way immediately. Yeah, when you do come from an individualist society, immediately you're like, what do you get from this? What do you want from me? Right? It feels transactional in some way. And as opposed to being in a culture where you're just like, no, this is what we do. We help each other. And that's the authenticity part too. Just like, of course, why wouldn't we? I know I find that so interesting, and I think it's something that we talk about a lot on this. I feel so privileged with this podcast to be able to interview women from so many different backgrounds and so many different countries and cultures. And I remember, I interviewed a guest who was talking about how like Somalia is very ADHD friendly because it's such a laid back country and you show up when you show up and there's not a lot of rules about when things start or when things finish. And there's like a siesta in the middle of the day. And so it was like all of these ways in which different social norms and social rules are really like ADHD friendly or not. And then you think about like capitalism and individualist societies are terrible for ADHD because like you said, like it's really, we're taught from birth that like we need to do one thing and do it well and like be in our spot and contribute to society, and that suffering is morally righteous, right? And all of these things that are part of our society where you're like, God, no wonder I'm so miserable. So I think we should have a list of like the top 10 countries that you should move to if you have ADHD.
I would put Turkey
Because
on
it's
this
almost
list, to
like
be
it's
honest.
almost
Yeah.
like it. Right. Well, and then I wonder, like, does ADHD even exist in certain countries? Because I feel like a lot of the time when if you're in an environment that is very friendly to your brain, you're not going to have the struggles that many of us associate with ADHD. And so while you still have your neurodivergent brain, you're not at a deficit. It doesn't feel like a disorder. And so do you even still have ADHD, right? And so that's why I think it's interesting that there's certain cultures where ADHD is hugely diagnosed and hugely pathologized. And then there's other cultures where it almost doesn't exist. And I think, is that because they reject the concept of it, or does it not exist because the people who have ADHD brains just aren't struggling? They're fine. Like they have their place in society and it's not an issue. I think that's so interesting to think about, like, as we kind of work through like what even is ADHD. Is it a set of behaviors in relationship to unfriendly environments like school or workplaces, or is it just our beautiful, chaotic brains wherever we are? Or, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yes, and it's interesting. Now I'm thinking like maybe the environment can be friendly in some cultures, but I'm sure, or actually I'm not sure. I'm thinking how is the career part, like when I have to choose my career or when I have to go to university or school, and because of the internet now, the how to say it, the tendency to compare with other people is still there. And I don't know, actually, especially like I'm interested in the career part because I'm always saying this idea that you don't have to change your interest. You have to discover your interest and then to choose a career that match your interest and your lifestyle and your dream lifestyle. And it's gonna work, but it's so scary because it's gonna be a phase in your life when it's not gonna work and it's gonna be messy. But I think this is why we are young, so we can mess up. Like we're so afraid. Like I don't know, maybe me, but I feel this in my generation. We're so afraid to make mistakes and so focused on perfection. Everyone wants to be millionaire and everyone wants to have great careers, whatever that means. And just this is the only part in your life where you can be messy. Like always, I'm thinking like you can mess up. Really, you can mess up because you don't have anything to lose. If I mess up now, it's very good because really I don't have any money to lose. I don't have a home to lose. I don't have a family to lose. I don't have anything. So I just go ahead and risk it all because I don't have so much. So it's really beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. And I think it's something that
Yeah, I was going to say you're making me miss the transient nature of my 20s because that was one of the things I always loved was the freedom of just like not having a lot of things, always moving around, like never sort of putting down roots until I think really children change that. Children make it a lot harder to move around. But yeah, that's so well said. And I think also I think your generation is at such an interesting pivotal time with social media too, because like you said, like so many young people are making a lot of money with social media. And university is not necessarily like, especially in the US, university is putting people into a lifetime of crippling debt. And it's not guaranteeing a job. It's not guaranteeing a career. It doesn't do any of that anymore. It's just putting people into incredible amounts of debt. So like my teenager, I'm like, I don't know if I would really pressure her to go to university at this point, because especially if she's just going to go to university for like liberal arts or something that I did, like I did, philosophy and political science, and I just went to university to like grow up, but it was a lot less expensive when I went. And so I feel like it's a really different time now in terms of education, and it's not just obvious that you would go to school immediately. So it feels like there's so many other different options in terms of like, where do you, and like you said, there are so many outliers who are just like making millions of dollars by being influencers. And it's really, what's the word I'm looking like? It's like the carrot that's dangling right in front of a lot of 20-year-olds, which is like, how can I also be that person?
Mhm. And I would ask that
I don't know what I'm
person,
saying. I'm just rambling at this point.
I
I think
think,
it's just very, very different from when I was in my 20s.
yeah, I think it makes sense. And at the same time, it leads to this question, like, what do you really want? Like, what do you want? And it's interesting when I ask, now I'm having a very interesting, I think I'm the happiest career-wise I ever been till now because I'm working online. I'm in Turkey, but I'm working online from Romania. So I'm working so I graduated University of Psychology, but I'm working with a real estate company from Romania on the social media part. I'm doing social media for them and personal development with the employees. So it's interesting because it's different, like completely two different positions in the same place. And also here I'm an English teacher. Like it's like this, my life. And also youth worker because sometimes I do some personal development classes with youth from here. So it's so diverse and dynamic and interesting, sometimes overwhelming, but I learned this metaphor that really helps me, like the seasons of my life. And sometimes it's winter, sometimes it's spring, sometimes it's autumn. And I learned, okay, now it's winter. Slow down a little bit. You might feel bad, you might feel dizzy, you might feel like you want to stay inside and cannot work so much. And then I sent some message, today I cannot, today no. And really gives me peace, like, oh, I have the right to say I cannot, and I'm still a good person, I'm still hardworking, I'm still having my way of discipline. but today I cannot. It's just today. It's just the season, and it's gonna come spring, and I'm gonna be energetic, and I'm gonna want to work, and I'm gonna reach out to you. Trust me. But it's a matter of patience, I think, and paying attention. But when you pay attention always on what others are doing and comparing yourself, why this person can and I cannot, you cannot pay attention on your own seasons because you're paying attention on other people's seasons. But you don't know. Maybe they're living in a country where they have only 2 seasons, and maybe you have 4. Or maybe you have a combination of 4 seasons, and it's so important to discover your own. I see it this way.
That is so fascinating too, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's been a big change for me since my diagnosis and I talk about this on the podcast too. We call them like biorhythms, but really kind of having the faith that if I'm tired, if today is not that day, that day will come, right? And being able to really lean into like, okay, this is a day where I can't get off the couch, and I'm fine with that because that does not define who I am, even though it feels like it in the moment. And realizing that like, yes, energy is cyclical, productivity is cyclical, all of that. But it's so fascinating to think about how even that changes depending on where we are in the world in terms of like, what are the cycles in, our area of the world? What are the seasons? Right? How are we biologically affected even by where on the earth we are located? I think that's really interesting.
Mm. Yes, and again,
so now, go ahead.
About what you said, I'm thinking it's our responsibility for me and for my youngster in my generations and generations that are about to come. I think it's our responsibility to choose where we want to live because really we have this opportunity. Like if you want to live anywhere on the planet, you can just say it and you can do it. Like first come the words, as the Bible says, and then really you can do it. We live in this time. And I think it's a responsibility that we have not only for ourselves, but our past generation. That's probably my parents, no matter how much they wanted to do what I'm doing now, they cannot. And they really disagree with what I'm doing because they don't understand. It's different. And it sounds like a bit of failure. Like, what are you doing? You dropped university? And actually, I didn't, but it sounds like this because normally it comes master. And now what? You're volunteer? You're not being paid. So you don't have a job. You're not at university. It's kind of this gray part of life that I love, but it's so, what? Like this? What are you doing? Are you still doing this? And it's beautiful because I had this safety that I offered myself. I found it my responsibility to offer this safety for myself. And even if, for example, my parents, even if they say no, I can feel in their eyes that if I were you, I would do the same. And I know for sure they would do the same. Because really different opportunities. And I say, I'm sorry, I know you say no, but in your heart I know it's a yes, and I also do it for you, not only for myself.
I love that. That's beautiful. I know. I think about all the times I made my mom cry when at first I didn't go to university, when all my friends went to university and my mom cried. And then I finally did go to university, but I dropped out of university and my mom cried. And like all of these like moments where I didn't take the path most, the well-worn chosen path. And my parents were terrified and they cried because like, oh, what does this mean? And and here, it all works out in the end. That's what I always say, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me, I wanted to ask you, you had said when you reached out to me that you had listened to the Emily Weinberg episode where we were talking about like what it's like to not, all of my guests, there's always this sense that everybody's figured it out, right? That we're like, oh, we got our ADHD diagnosis and now everything is wonderful. And like, I'm always trying to really establish that that's not true. Like we're all a hot mess still. But there are some incredible moments after an ADHD diagnosis. It is a really incredible opportunity to reframe a lot of how we look at it in life. And even just when you reached out to me, you were like, after my ADHD diagnosis, my journey, it was like, I just felt like life got more beautiful, but also you're still struggling, right? And we're still sort of getting through it, and we still have ADHD at the end of the day. So I'm curious, my question, I guess, is what would you say to somebody who feels like they're still nothing but struggle?
I think I'll go back to the season metaphor because this works so good for me to have an image with what I'm feeling right now. And what helps me is the season metaphor because when I'm in the winter, it's so dark that I cannot see any light. And it's really dark and I don't remember it's winter. Like when I'm in the winter, I cannot know I'm in the winter because maybe I'm inside of my home and it's warm. In my home, it's warm, but the outside is dark and cold, and I cannot do anything. But I might not know. And sometimes it's just to know that everything is temporary for me helps. Like joy is temporary, sadness is temporary. And it's just a sense of I don't have to control. Like sometimes it's just this and people don't see me, but it's just this kind of physical movement. Like it is what it is. Like sometimes really it's just
Just shrug.
and some I think
Yeah,
the
I always like the
struggle.
word surrender in that moment.
Mhm. Yes, it kind of. I remember I had this. Mm, yes, after I graduated university, I was still in kind of this. What I have to do, I have to do, I have to control. Everything has to be controlled. And I remember I had this problem. I cannot swim, and I cannot swim because always my body is so clingy and so tense. And when you swim, you have to a bit free yourself up. And I remember we were in the sea with I was in another project and we were in the sea with some friends and one of our mentors from that project. And I said I cannot swim because and he said you're so tense, Diana, like really. And he said like look, I'm just floating because I let go. And at the beginning, I was like, "Huh, what? Like, if I let go, then water will go in my ears and my nose, and I'm gonna really like all this kind of tension." And I remember the last day of the project comes, and I had to go back to my real life, and I was in the water alone this time, and I just said, "I'm so scared that I cannot feel fear anymore. I have so much pain that I cannot feel pain anymore," and I floated. And it was an emotional moment for me because it seems small, but first time I could float because I let go. And sometimes I'm going back mentally in that place where I just floated. And maybe I could go down, maybe I can stay on the surface, but if I go down, I learn something and I can always raise myself up, like I can stand on my legs, on my feet. If I float, then I just float. Sometimes it's like this.
Hmm. That's so beautiful. God, you have such a gift of metaphor. I feel like there's been so many beautiful images that you're right. I feel like some of those images, some of those stories and allegories are so helpful for us when it comes to like something to hold on to, something to anchor us. Um, in terms of like reframing and changing some of our ideas, they can be so powerful. So I really like that one, and I talk about that too sometimes with like I feel like there's moments where we are madly paddling upstream and treading water and desperately trying to stay afloat, and then the answer is just to let go and like let the current take you along and and once the moment you start like trying to uh, jam a square peg into a round hole, like as soon as you stop trying to force something and just relax and let go, that's when it starts to fall into place.
Yeah, and it's such a gift, I think, because
Yeah.
for so long I was thinking this sensitivity will lead me nowhere. I have to become stronger. I have to be resilient. And I think now I see it as a gift because exactly this sensitivity makes me to be so connected with what's going on around me and so fast I feel something is off, I need to stop. This person not good for me. I need to go a bit of distance. This this choice I do doesn't feel right, and because I use so much, I feel. I can actually be connected with how I feel, and I think even people that maybe they don't have this, I don't know how to call it, gift of neurodivergency, they need to connect with this kind of I feel right now, and I find it as a gift, especially now that I'm working on this coaching part. Like, I'm saying, I think bringing some metaphors help, and also it helped me like to be so little judgmental in my real life because I'm such a mess that I don't know what a person can do to make me be judgmental, because then I look at my life and just really what you do is perfect. Trust me, you're perfect. It's like this.
That's beautifully said. Now, if you could, I love to ask if you could rename ADHD to something else. Would you call it something else?
Maybe, I don't know. I would call it, I think, I swear to God, I'm not a bad person because I
I love that one.
I find it so difficult sometimes, and I don't know how much time we have, but I remember first time I listened and I heard about narcissism from Dr. Ramani, and she highlights so many traits that narcissist people have that also I have, like, and I'm just uh, a bit like, because also I forget to answer text. Sometimes I cannot listen what the other person says to me. I forget about people, and there are so many common traits, and I was thinking how interesting is that. But maybe this, I hope maybe you'll have another conversation with a person that is better prepared than me to talk about this, because I find it really interesting, this dynamic and the risk about, not risk, but the dynamic between a person with ADHD with a person with narcissist personality trait, because both of them can have some similar traits, and also there's this anxiety trait that the person with ADHD can have, and also the love bombing that can be even more attractive for an ADHD person than for, let's say, a normal person, because we're so wow, so many, woo, yay, and then it comes the other part when it goes a bit down, and it's so interesting. I find it, and I'm writing a book now. I don't know, maybe I'll finish in 5 years, because I started because it's interesting for me, and I imagine this relationship between a person with ADHD and a person with narcissism. And I kind of went back to my journals because I wanted to see a little bit how my mind is going on, so I can highlight the physical portrait or of this person in a more accurate way. So I'm going in this direction. But about your question, yes, I would rename it. As I said, I'm not a bad person. Really, I'm not. Like, really, I forget. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry. This is something I say all the time because really I feel bad. But
Yeah.
it's like this.
My intentions are pure. Maybe that's what we should call it. But you know, it's funny that you say that about the narcissist too, right? Because I think that is such a good point. There are some overlaps, but I think it's a lot of it comes down to intention, right? And I think that, like, for the most part, many of us are very curious. We're puzzle solvers, and there's nothing more confounding, there's nothing more puzzling than me. And so we do spend a lot of time trying to figure ourselves out, and we are the most important person in our life. And so there are times where it kind of we do sometimes relationally make mistakes with other people, where, you know, going back to some of those like social cues that can be really difficult for us, or where we feel like, you know, we've done something that we didn't do something that was expected of us, and therefore we've messed up and all of that. But I think the biggest difference, for me at least, between somebody who is neurodivergent and narcissism is the questioning of, am I a narcissist? Like, I don't think narcissists are capable of questioning because there's that idea of, like, there's not the desire to be better, which comes from the neurodivergent, like, curiosity, right? Like, who am I in this world? Who am I affecting? What is my relationship with people? All of those questions that are sort of self-centered in a way are not something a narcissist questions, right? A narcissist is the center of the universe. They don't apologize, right? And so I think for me, at least, that's what I've come up with, because I definitely, when I was reading a book on narcissism, there were very many parts where I was like, oh no, I really relate to this, but I'm also like, I don't feel like narcissists spend a lot of time reading books about narcissism and whether they are or aren't narcissists. So that's what I've told myself, at least. Like I said, I'm not a professional psychologist, so I don't know, but that's my theory, at least.
Yes, Dr. Ramani said the same thing that there's no people that are 100% perfect or always think about the others. Sometimes we have some moments when we are a bit more self-centered, but the difference is exactly this one that we question, did I do something wrong? But again, living in this society that we're so denied and pushed down, it's not right what you feel, you're wrong. It kind of leads us to this confusion, like, what am I feeling? And also this growing up with this, I feel this, and everyone says, no, you're actually this. It leads to so many other disorders, like, I don't know. And I remember you had a guest talking about eating disorder and ADHD or other things that are so connected with just being denied all of your life. So then maybe I think there are 2 points that I can see. Either you deny yourself always, you don't know what you feel, either you start to self-diagnose yourself all the time. Always I think it's a problem with me. Something hurts me because I don't see that there's a problem with the way I think life in general. All small problems, all small things, I start to identify them. Something hurts me in my body, maybe I'm sick, I'm gonna die. Something small, I don't know, doesn't work in my life, it's so bad. And because it kind of compensates, I cannot see that I see the whole life differently and there's something different with my brain and my mind. So all other things that goes a bit different, I start to see them as extreme. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think that's interesting because I think it falls under the same category of control. And that's a theme that I think that we talk about a lot too. Which is like when we feel so out of control, when we feel so different, when we feel like our natural way of being is wrong, and we're told those messages throughout our life and we internalize that, many of us are looking for ways in which we can control our environment and feel a little more in control. And so you think about like what falls under that umbrella of control. So like eating is one, body dysmorphia is another one, but also like people pleasing and perfectionism and hypochondria, right? It's another one where it's sort of like, this is something little, but I need to understand it. And I need to feel like I'm in control. I need to be in charge. And so all of these are really, they're trauma responses, right? Like these are all forms of hypervigilance, which is like, I need to figure this out and I need to fix this. That's all hypervigilance, which is like the number one trauma response. And so like, it's fascinating to me that these all kind of have a relationship to this idea of like, oh God, I have to fix this. I have to be in, I have to get some control over my environment and who I am and the people around me because I feel so chaotic all the time. So yeah, I find that all super fascinating. And so the hypochondria I hadn't really thought about, but I think it absolutely falls under that same, that same family of hypervigilance, right? It's like, oh God, like I have a headache. Am I having an aneurysm? Like all those immediate ways in which we go from 0 to 100. I think it is really like, I have to understand everything.
Yes, and
anyway,
also,
so
again, please say.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yes, and also I'm thinking about, again, my childhood, how sometimes I say I have a headache or I have this, and always, you're right, you don't have anything, it's fine. And, and even more, it amplifies because I'm thinking, but no, I think, and then what, maybe I'm wrong, and it's just like, like this. And about the controlling and being pushed down all the time or being pushed up all the time by society and people and friends and family. And like Kristen Butler said this idea of comfort zone that she supports actually, because in our society now is just you have to give up your comfort zone. You have always to reach for more. And she says actually comfort zone is really good because when you're comfortable you can grow. And I think this in myself, like the more I understand myself and I understand what comfort means for me, the more I can grow. And she made a difference between complacency and comfort. And I found it so useful to have these different terms for something that I felt for so long. I said, oh yes, I need comfort. And of course I don't like complacency because I have this huge interest and energy for life and I want to try this and this and this and this, but I need to be comfortable when I'm doing. So yes, there are some things I can control, like some people that I have around me or how I spend my free time. And there are some other things I cannot control. And then I put my headphones on and I just go ahead with music. For example, when I'm on the street and so many noise, so much things that I can focus on. So in this moment, I cannot control. But then I reach for my comfort. And how I decided that I choose my career path right now. This is my definition of comfort, having more careers in the same career, because I cannot do just one thing. And also I learned to use the word I'm bored, like to embrace it, because again, all my life being bored is such a bad trait. I don't know why. Like, you cannot get bored. You have to pay more attention. You have to do more. You have to push more. And giving myself the permission now as an adult, like to say, I'm bored. I cannot do this because I'm bored. And I can do it tomorrow again. I can do it 1 hour today and 1 hour tomorrow. And that's fine. And it's really beautiful to be able to accept the way you feel and also give yourself validation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, language is so important. I love that the difference between comfort and complacency, I think, is really important too. Where like your comfort zone is wherever you feel best in the moment. And maybe that would be today it's chaotic, doing a million things at once, and that's your comfort zone. And tomorrow it's going to be staying in bed all day. But like that, I like that idea that it's not just that it's healing, right? That's where you are. I don't know that, like you said, I think it's the place to grow. It's a good point. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely lovely. And I really appreciated you reaching out to me and sharing your perspective. And gosh, I feel like there's been so many nuggets of wisdom. I'm going to have to warn people to have a note paper and a pen for this episode. This has been so lovely. Thank you so much. So now I know you're on Instagram as Psych and Stories. Where can people reach you? Where can people find you online?
Yes, so on Instagram, I think it's the main page where I am active, because it gives me the possibility to do different formats of posts. I can do videos, I can do text, I can do video with text, I can do so many other different things. So that's why I love social media so much, because it gives you the possibility to be so creative and not do just one thing. So on Instagram, I'm Psych and Stories Diana, and I'm working a little bit on my website, but my main activity is on Instagram, yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll have a link to that in the show notes. But thank you, Diana. It's just absolutely been lovely speaking with you today, and really appreciate. I really appreciate your perspective. I'm still just in awe of your wisdom at 22. So I can't imagine what the world holds for you. So thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much, Kate. It really is an honor. Thank you.